Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. I am Jai Shri Radha Devi Dasi, and we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, Text 24. I don't think it's written on the board, so if you have your devices, you can pull it up. In the meantime, I'm going to say some prayers to our spiritual teachers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurulmitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisance unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jana Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadatit Swapadantikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who is established within this material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnav devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Pandit, Shri Vas Thakur, and all the devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I pray that Shri Shri Radha Kalachandji, Prabhupada, and Srila Gurudev use me as their instrument so that their message can flow through me to give me the words to serve the Vaishnavas listening. So as I said, today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Creation, Chapter 8, Prayers by Queen Kunti and Parikshit Saved, Text 24. Please repeat. Vishan Mahagne Purushada Darshanad. 1:8:24. Asat Sabhya Vana Vasa Krichata Mrde Nika Maharatastro Drani Astratas Chasma Hare Birakshita. Please chant. Yeah. Vishan Mahagne Purushada Darshanad Asat Sabhaya Vanavasha Krichitra. Please repeat. Visat, from poison. Mahagne, from the great fire. Purushada, the man-eaters. Darshanat, by combating. Asat, vicious. Sabhaya, assembly. Vanavasa, exile to the forest. Gritrata, sufferings. Mrde, again and again in battle. Aneka, many. Maharatha, great generals. Ashtrata, weapons. Drowni, the son of Dronacharya. Astrata, from the weapon of. Ja, and. Asma, indicating past tense. Hare, O my Lord. Abhirakshita, protected completely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. My dear Krishna, your Lordship has protected us from a poisoned cake, from a great fire, from cannibals, from the vicious assembly, from sufferings during our exile in the forest, and from the battle where great generals fought. And now you have saved us from the weapon of Ashvatthama. Purport. The list of dangerous encounters is submitted herein. Devaki was once put into difficulty by her envious brother. Otherwise, she was well. But Kunti Devi and her sons were put into one difficulty after another for years and years together. They were put into trouble by Duryodhana and his party due to the kingdom, and each and every time the sons of Kunti were saved by the Lord. Once Bhima was administered poison in a cake. Once they were put into a house made of shellac and set afire. And once Draupadi was dragged out, and attempts were made to insult her by stripping her naked in the vicious assembly of the Kurus. The Lord saved Draupadi by supplying an immeasurable length of cloth, and Duryodhana's party failed to see her naked. Similarly, when they were exiled in the forest, Bhima had to fight with the man-eater demon Hidimba Rakshasa, but the Lord saved him. So it was not finished there. After all these tribulations, there was the great battle of Kurukshetra, and Arjuna had to meet such great generals as Drona, Bhishma, and Karna, all powerful fighters. And at last, even when everything was done away with, there was the Brahmastra released by the son of Dronacharya to kill the child within the womb of Uttara. So the Lord saved the only surviving descendant of the Kurus, Maharaj Parikshit. So, we are discussing the prayers of Mother Kunti here. And her prayers are very unique, because we can see that she and her family were put into trouble one after another. And her prayers weren't, God, why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me and my family? Her prayers were, thank you so much for these calamities, for they help me to remember you. You know, I'll accept any challenges as long as it helps me to remember you. And the reason she can feel this way is because she has 100% faith that she's under the Lord's protection. When we have that kind of faith that we know that we are taken care of, we feel a lot more freer. We feel like we can handle any challenge that comes our way. I can remember, small things, right? Like when you're being raised by loving parents and they're providing everything. You've got a nice house, you've got food, you've got clothes, you're going to a nice school, they support you in your school. You feel like you can really put in all the effort that you need to do to succeed at school. You have their help, their support, everything that you can do. I mean, my parents even supported by financing parts of my college. During medical school, I lived with them, so I didn't have to take as much loans, right? So they continue to support me even in my adult life. So I had that level of protection my entire life that gave me this feeling that I could do anything. But in contrast, we see oftentimes with children, even adults after they've been children in such cases where they didn't have a stable childhood, and they feel like they're constantly insecure about where their next meal is going to come from, if their parents are going to come pick them up, if they have one parent or two parents. And you can see that their schoolwork totally suffers because they don't have that feeling of being able to do what they want to do. Their attention is distracted in so many other places. So we can have this same level of faith even if we have it with our parents or don't have it with our parents, with God, with Krishna. And we see through these examples in the scriptures that he protects us over and over again. And it's not just Mother Kunti. We know the story of Prahlad Maharaj. His father, here's a child of the age of 5, and his father was so envious of his son's reverence of God that he tried to beat it, to threaten it out of him, threaten this love of God out of his child by putting him in the path of an elephant so that the elephant can stamp on him, put him in a vat of burning oil, in a pit of snakes. I mean, these are like horrible things that, here, fraction of these things, Child Protective Services hopefully would take their kid away from their parents for these atrocities. And yet, Prahlad Maharaj maintained his faith and love throughout all of these calamities because Krishna saved him through all of these calamities. He saved him so the elephant didn't step on him, so that when he was put into the vat of burning oil, it was actually like turned into just warm water. So it didn't have that effect. The snakes were, turned into ropes. So Krishna protected him over and over again. And while it may seem we don't have these overt examples of Krishna protecting us, right? Like, such as Mother Draupadi having an endless supply of saris. It may seem like we don't have these examples, but we do over and over again. Even when calamity befalls us, we can always think, man, it could have been so much worse. Recently, my sister took a pretty severe fall and fractured a couple of teeth, her arm, and it was really bad. And, after she got over the initial shock and, she's under treatment and everything, one of her first thoughts was, man, this could have been so much worse, right? And I was thinking, I thought it was pretty bad because I saw it happen, and it was like shocking to just even imagine that, to see it happen. And she was like, it could have been worse. But, it's still heavy that it happened to her. But, we can see this over and over again in our lives, that things could have been worse. Another example of me feeling Krishna's protection 100%. I've given this example before, but it's so profound. I remember one time I was exiting the highway to get to home, which is the same highway, the exit that you take to get here. I think it's Munger and East Grand Avenue is the exit. And if you know anything about that exit, it's kind of a short exit before you get to the light. And there's like an incline from the highway to the exit road, the frontage road there. So usually when I come to a light, I have a habit of like pulling out my phone, checking my text messages, and because it's the light, you're not doing anything. But this moment, I don't know why I didn't do that. I was like paying attention, and I was staring at the light, and all of a sudden I saw this car in my rearview mirror. It was coming up on me, and it wasn't slowing down. I knew it wasn't going to slow down in time to not hit me. And I looked, and I was kind of like bracing for the impact. And all of a sudden, I felt this like whoosh, like this, I don't know, big gust of wind. And that car, man, it didn't just not hit me. It somehow or another went into the grassy area and was like up on the hill. And I was like, whoa, this car totally would have hit me if it hadn't, been pushed out of the way, is what it really felt like. And in that moment, it was really interesting because I was wearing a Nrsingadev shirt, and I really felt like Nrsingadev had swung his hand and pushed the car so that it had jumped up on the hill instead of crashing into me. And if it had, at that speed it was going, it would have been pretty severe. Like I would have crashed in the car in front of me. I mean, who knows what could have happened to that moment. So it's like these little moments that we can have and we can think of in our lives that we can feel Krishna's protection every single moment. And we can use those examples for those times that we struggle to feel Krishna's protection. When things happen to us, sometimes it's hard to feel Krishna's protection because we feel so in our challenges and our struggles. We can get so caught up in what we're feeling and experiencing that we can forget that Krishna's always looking out for us, that he always has our back. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 1856 and 1857, though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee under my protection reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. So he confirms that as long as we're thinking of him, we can be rest assured that we are going to be under his protection. I've shared a couple of examples of how we can feel his protection. Does anyone want to think of examples or realizations where you felt Krishna's protection or you've struggled to feel Krishna's protection that you want to share? Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I feel Krishna is protecting me right now. Just by hearing you speak so nicely about Krishna's protection. And I especially like when you said, it could have been worse. And I feel that's the basis of, it can be a basis of gratitude. So whatever happens, it could have been worse. So I feel Krishna's protection just in the Sangha of devotees, and having this opportunity to hear from all the devotees.
Thank you so much for sharing.
So more than physical protection, all of us, we know that for us it is protection of our devotional service. So I can bet, I'm pretty sure Krishna has definitely protected me despite of several offenses to the devotees and my egoistic nature and offensive nature. Krishna has protected my.
Thank you. That's a great point. Thank Thank you for sharing.
I had the same thought as Gokulananda Prabhu. I always get myself into trouble somehow with the devotees, or I make a bad decision, or I flare up at them, and somehow they always forgive me, or somehow I'm still here, which is very surprising. But I just think, wow, like I'm pretty fortunate that I keep messing up, but Krishna's like, okay, I'll give you another chance. Over and
Very
over.
good.
Hare Krishna, thank you for class so far. Something that came up for me was a verse from the Bible that I heard recently. I'll share it if you'd like. It says, the waters saw you, God. The waters saw you and writhed. The very depths were convulsed. The clouds poured down water. The heavens resounded with thunder. Your thunder was heard in the whirlwind. Your lightning lit up the world, and the earth trembled and quaked. Your path led through the sea, your way through the mighty waters, though your footprints were not seen. And this is just the end part of a psalm, of a whole song that was written. And what it's describing is that the storms that we face in life were sent by God. They are of God's doing. So whenever we need protection, it's like God's doing that on purpose. Krishna was not just letting them fall into trouble. He was doing that on purpose because it strengthened their faith when they would call out to him through the storm. And so that is that's his, like it's saying in the verse, that's his path to us. That's his way of reaching to us, is to cause the trouble. So whenever I experience storms in my life, I just try to remember that and know that even though his footprints may not be seen, I may not understand exactly how or what the purpose is, why the storm is here, but I know that it's him. So having, he gives us the faith, and then, that's our protection.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. The verse that you shared reminds me of the pastime of Govardhan Puja, right? So here's another example of Krishna protecting his devotees in a very concrete way. It's raining and flooding and storming in Vrindavan, and he just lifts the hill and protects all of the residents of Vrindavan by doing this, right? And gives them the opportunity to spend 7 days and 7 nights with him nonstop, right? So Krishna does this, and he also protects us through his devotees, as someone shared, right? I've shared this before. A few years ago when we had that snowpocalypse here in Dallas, and we went without power for so many hours. Like, we would have power for an hour, and then it would go off again for 12 hours. And it was below 0 degrees outside. We'd never had these kind of cold temperatures. And I remember during this time I was feeling so miserable and struggling because I hate the cold. And to be in the cold, and it was 30 degrees inside the house. It was so cold. But I remember that I would get these messages, and devotees would say hey, I have power right now. Whoever wants to come over, charge your phones, get warm, come over. It would happen quite regularly because we would all have power at different times. So yes, everybody on my block would all not have power at the same time, but we have a different grid than the people across the street, just a few blocks over, they have a different grid. So we had these devotees reaching out, and I remember a couple of people texting me personally hey, are you okay? Just making sure, I think especially Vritadraja Swami had texted me, and I was thinking he's going through this himself, he's also suffering through the same thing, and yet he's reaching out to people and checking to make sure that they're okay. And that's the power of Krishna and his devotees. Sometimes he works through his devotees to protect us. And, we have to really sometimes work hard to see that, especially if we have drama or strife with other devotees, because we're human and we have, our egos and our conditioning, and sometimes we don't get along with everyone. But we have to remember that we're all here under Krishna's protection, and we're all here to give each other protection. The other thing I thought of when you shared was that there's this saying, I think in India or amongst Indians, that don't worship that beautiful black boy by the Ganga, because he'll take everything away from you, right? It's better to worship like Lord Shiva or some of the demigods, because they bestow on you just what you're asking for. But Krishna gives us exactly what we need. So it's a very different thing when we approach Krishna. So sometimes we can see that devotees especially are put into calamities. They're put into challenges. You know, if we hear the stories of the devotees that established, temples and places of worship in Russia, and the hardships that they had to go through, and different things like that, right? Like a couple of years ago, there was that attack on, I can't remember where, there was an attack on the temple by the Muslims, and it was a Hare Krishna temple, and it was really bad. Like, so many people got injured and hurt, and people could say, like, where is Krishna's protection, right? But sometimes Krishna allows certain challenges to befall us because it strengthens our faith in him. It makes us reach out to him even more. And we always have to remember that Krishna, or God, never gives us more than we can handle. It may seem like it, like sometimes you can think, oh my God, this is so overwhelming, I can't handle this. I remember during that cold, it was the third day, and the power had just gone off again, and it was only on for like 30 minutes. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't handle this. And then I was like, well, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you can't handle it? You have to. Like, it's cold. Like, just suck it up. Like, this is going to pass, and, it will get better. Like, you're not going to die. You have a house. There's people out there that didn't even have a house to protect them from the wind. Yes, it was 30 degrees inside my house, but it was 0 outside. And, so I was thinking, Krishna, like, I'm not going to die. Krishna's not, like, that's not what Krishna's going to allow to happen. Like, I had that full knowledge and faith that I wasn't going to die. So yes, it was challenging and I was suffering, but I was like, you know what? I can sit here and suffer and complain, or I can just make the most of this situation and use this time to really chant. I mean, I can't be on my phone. I can't watch TV. There's nothing I can do at this moment except to chant. And, I kind of really got into it. And it was not 45 minutes later that I came to this realization that the power came on and stayed on. And I felt like, that's the message. That's where Krishna wanted to push me to, right? Like that brink of that moment where I thought I couldn't handle anymore, and realized, oh no, I can, because I have Krishna. Like, I can handle more. And it was like, okay, and then he allowed the suffering to end. So we can see these things in our lives over and over again, that Krishna really does care for us. And then I was also reminded of a prayer that Srila Prabhupada said, or I've heard my guru share that Srila Prabhupada has said. And it was something like, his only prayer is that Krishna protect him from Maya, right? From this idea of falling back down and getting caught up in the everyday feelings and drama and things like that. Like, you could see he was already not in this world. He was here, but he was so transcendental. And yet he still had this Krishna protect me, because at any moment Maya can take over. And he felt like that, this is the prayer that we have to have. I also found these words in the purport of Bhagavad Gita 9:18, that I found really profound. Srila Prabhupada says, Krishna is the ultimate goal of shelter, and therefore one should take shelter of Krishna either for protection or for annihilation of his distress. And whenever we have to take protection, we should know that our protection must be a living force. Krishna is the supreme living entity. And since Krishna is the source of our generation, or the Supreme Father, no one can be a better friend than Krishna, nor can anyone be a better well-wisher. So this is really, one of the things that really stuck out to me is that protection is a living force. That means it changes. What protection is changes as we change. It is flexible. It's not just one thing, right? It's different. It's what's protection for me may not be enough for someone else, or may be more than what another person needs. So it's a living force. It's very much playing around with what we are doing, right? What our needs are, what our desires are, and how will we respond to it. And so when we look at it that way, we can see protection and Krishna are non-different. We can have that full faith that Krishna will protect us, and whatever is happening, we can always, accept that this is Krishna's protection. I remember a story. I'm probably going to butcher this because I never remember it quite properly, but there's a story that's shared where this guy wakes up late, and he's late for work, and he didn't hear his alarm. And then as he's driving, the road that he's normally taking is like detoured, so he gets even more late. And then when he goes to lunch to order his sandwich, the sandwich is wrong, so he has to send it back, and it takes he gets the wrong order, so he has to wait longer, so he's late again for his next meeting. And then all these things happen throughout the day, and at the end of the day, he's like, God, why didn't you protect me? Why didn't you, save me from being late or having these things happen to me? And God was showing him at each example that he thought something wrong happened, that he was actually being protected. I woke you up late because if you had left at your usual time, you would have, there was this accident. I sent you on a different way because there was a boulder or rock or something that was going to fall. And that the original sandwich that you got, the person who made it was sick, and you would have gotten sick. So the next person, was healthier, and you wouldn't have gotten those germs. So one by one, he showed him that, no, you thought this was bad, but I was actually saving you from something worse. And so we may not have Krishna say that verbally to us, but we can look at that and say, wow, these things happened for a reason. I may not know it. I may not ever know it. But really, it's more about having that faith and gratitude that Krishna's always protecting me, and being grateful for every moment that we have in his, protection, which is every moment. So I'll stop here and see if we have any questions or realizations or thoughts or comments that we want to share.
About devotees in Russia and how they underwent so much hardship.
I don't know the names, do you?
No, that's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
I'm really bad with remembering names anyway. But yeah, I remember there's one that he even went to jail, right?
Right. Does anyone know his name? Was it? The one who fought the Yeah. Mantashanti? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I had also another question, so when you get to that point where it just can't get worse, I mean, you're on your deathbed, how do you still maintain that same level of gratitude because the end is near?
It's practicing it when it's not at that level of direness, right? It's when we practice our faith and devotion when things are easy. So an example I can give is when I was in training for medical, for being a doctor in residency, as a family practice doctor, we would have to also attend childbirth, right, deliver babies. And one of the things that we had to do throughout the 3 years that we were there, we had to deliver like 30 babies and have like 10 mothers that we followed throughout their pregnancy. And generally they were uncomplicated, because if they were complicated, we sent them to OB-GYN, an actual gynecologist, obstetrician. But during this training, they said that we want to see as many normal births as we can and get used to the practice. That way, when something off happens that's not expected, we're that much better able to handle it, because we know we have that muscle memory of what to do, even, and we can continue doing what we're trained to do, even in the face of like emergency, things like that. In a more, like down to earth or everyday way, one of the things that I've learned to do is when I dress the deities, I'm very methodical in the way I do it. I even have all of my paraphernalia laid out in a certain way, like when I make my tray the day before. That way, like, there have been times where I've woken up late and rushed and was like rushing to get the deities dressed in time for the 7 o'clock curtains opening. And because I had a method that I would do when things were relaxed, I was able to do that, like just, follow my method, be able to serve, that in that moment it was Radha Govinda, really nicely, have them dressed really nicely and still be ready on time. Obviously, there was some divine intervention there as well. But because of that systematic methodology that I had, it was really helpful in that moment. So if we have this practice of constantly being grateful to Krishna for everything, for chanting, for remembering him always, as he said in 1857, just depend upon me and work always under my protection, then even in those moments where things feel really dire, we're trained. We have this practice of reaching out to God as our, reflex. It's just a reflex that we do. I know it still takes time, because every time I'm like almost in an accident, Krishna is not the words that come out of my mouth. Sometimes other words do, and then I'm like, oh no, I should think about Krishna instead, right? So it's still practice, right? And I remember there was one time where I almost got into an accident, and I was like, oh, Krishna. And I was like, oh, I did it, right? So, it's like it comes with practice, So it didn't happen again, but still, I did it in that one time. So. It might have run out of batteries.
Hare Krishna. On your point that you made during the class, you said that Krishna knows how much we can handle, and I also heard an analogy about that recently. I get a lot of, like, on my Facebook and stuff, I get a lot of Christian things, because that's the stuff that I try to like so that I don't get too much Maya. It's like the God conscious things. So there was this one video that that I saw, and it was talking about this verse in the Old Testament that says, the Bible speaks in a lot of metaphors. So it's saying that God is like a silversmith. And so it was like a story of these women, and they were studying the Bible, and they came upon this verse, and they didn't understand. So one of the women from the Bible study group decided to go and make an appointment with a silversmith and watch what he was doing. So she did, and She did, and she was watching what the silversmith was doing, and he was holding the silver in the fire for a very, very, very long time, while being very attentive to it. And she asked him why. He said because the fire is bringing out all of the impurities and softening it so that it's malleable. And she said, well, you're paying a lot of attention to it. You're really focused on it. And he said, yeah, because if I hold it in the fire for a moment too long, then the silver will be ruined and I won't be able to do anything with it. And so it was kind of, that was the lesson from the story, was that not only is he making sure that we're not held in the fire for too long because that could damage us or traumatize us, but he's also being attentive the entire time. He's there with us the entire time, being very personal and making sure that that we're not getting too much. Yeah, I like that analogy. I'm glad it came up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a wonderful analogy.
Thank you very much for a wonderful class. So speaking about protection, I was thinking Krishna may or may not physically protect his devotees. Like we have examples in the scriptures. Bhishmadev, who is one of the Mahajans, physically he was not protected. Then Abhimanyu, he personally trained him and he was his nephew, right? So from contemporary examples also, if you see within our movement, we can say Ayendra Prabhu is known as Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So physically, he may or may not. But one thing is for sure, as is promised, right? In that very famous verse, it says, I protect what they have, I carry what they lack, and I preserve what they have, right? So I can recollect my Guru Maharaj, Radhanath Swami Maharaj, he once gave wonderful class, and in this connection, he quoted Lord Brahma's that celebrated verse in the 10th canto, Tattenu Kampa Susamikshamanu. So he brought out wonderful points. He said there are three things speaking about what consciousness a sadhaka, practitioner, should have while going through these ordeals. So he says, number one, this is my own karma, Lord Brahma is saying. And then number two, my karma has been discounted mercifully by Lord Krishna. So if in an accident I was to lose one of my limbs, Krishna has mercifully discounted it, and now it's reduced to the mere fracture, something like that. And third one, this is an opportunity for me, to intensify my surrender to Krishna and take shelter. So Brahmaji says, any practitioner who has this consciousness has a rightful claim. He inherits, that's the word, Sadaya Bhak. So he inherits the claim of going back to Krishna. So we can see, physically devotees may or may not be protected, but they have a rightful claim to go back to Krishna. That is definitely protected.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful verse. I remember the first part of it. Tate nukampam sushamikshamano bunjane vatmakritam vipakam. What's the next part? Yeah. Famous verse. I was thinking about how when I was new to Krishna consciousness, when you don't live in an ashram, and you're working in the world, sometimes your education in ISKCON's kind of piecemeal. You don't learn certain things until much later. And I just remember, I'd read the Bhagavad Gita, and I'd been going to Bhagavad Gita classes, and I love Bhagavad Gita so much. I used to carry it in my purse everywhere. And I so appreciated the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna. And then 2 years into my ISKCON journey, I learned that the Pandavas didn't really have a happy ending, that they died by falling off a mountain or something. They were climbing, and I was like, are you kidding me? After everything that Arjuna went through with Krishna, and they were BFFs, and that this is how he goes? And it seemed so wrong and unjust to me, because that was my consciousness at the time. I just assumed that you're best friends with Krishna, everything's going to be perfect. And through education and further Shastra study, I learned that that's, not real happiness, that our happiness, when Maharaj said that, when we think of happiness and peace, we think of things. But for Krishna, it's consciousness. So sometimes he takes away the things to give you the consciousness. And then I was also thinking, because I've been reading, my daughter and I, we read I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu Story by Giriraj Swami. And now we're reading Dancing White Elephants. And the dedication these young Western disciples had to Srila Prabhupada. And some of the ordeals they went through, sleeping and on the floor with rats, biting them, dysentery, no running water, and one could probably with their physical eyes look at that and be like, where's Krishna's protection? These young, wealthy, people gave up everything to serve the pure devotee and go all the way to India, and how are they being repaid? With dysentery and rat bites? But again, it's one of those situations that we can't really understand with our material eyes, but we can look at it now and see that it was for the greater glory of Prabhupada, to show the whole world what true happiness is, right? Not the wealth of the Western world, but that devotion to the spiritual master. And that was Krishna's protection, again, giving them that consciousness through these ordeals. Those are my reflections.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yes. It's working.
I had a question. So we say that Krishna will, he won't give you more than you can handle and stuff. But what do you do if you feel like you aren't handling it? Like you feel like you're losing your Krishna consciousness. You feel like your sadhana's falling off. You feel like your spiritual life is really going downhill. What do you do when you feel like you've been given more than you can handle? And have you been given more than you can handle?
So a couple of things come to mind is that hopefully we have really intimate, confidential friends, devotees that we can go to in these times of needs. Sometimes in these situations, it's even hard to, it's especially hard to go to an elder, right? Like your guru. But if you have a peer that you can share your struggles with, right? That they can listen to you. And if you don't have that, just turning to Krishna and asking him for that help, right? Krishna, I don't know how to get through this. Please help me. Please give me the resources. Please show me how to handle this, right? The key there is really to just kind of surrender into it, right? To have that practice of making sure that we can depend on him at every moment, even in those moments where we struggle to depend on him, right? Because we know that these challenges, when we get through it, it makes us stronger. I'll end with this, analogy of the butterfly. If you know anything about butterflies, they're first caterpillars, right? And then they weave a cocoon and they go into this really hard cocoon. And when it's time to emerge as a butterfly, they have to actually struggle. They're struggling to get out, and it's really hard for them. And they might get tired, and they finally eventually emerge as a butterfly. But as an outsider, if we were to see this cocoon and we see the caterpillar struggling, and we think, oh, let me help, and we cut the cocoon to help them come out, well, actually the butterfly ends up dying because they don't develop those muscles that help them fly, that develop their wings, and then they can't thrive out there. So, we have to understand that our challenges will make us stronger, right? We have to have that faith that this is preparing us for something even more, right? Because that's just the material world. We have good times and we have challenging times. And if we come to a place where we really depend on Krishna for our protection, and we really see that, and we're grateful for it, then we'll just see that we have good days and we have better days, right? Because everything is good when you're under Krishna's service. And I don't mean in this like fake, oh, I'm living in the bliss and everything's great kind of thing, but truly internally we have this peace and joy within, as Manjari Gopika shared, that the consciousness is finding the peace and the joy, not in the things, not the external, not in other people, not it's within ourselves. Yes, last point, because I think we're over.
Also was thinking on the point that Justina made, that that sometimes Krishna's point is for us to know and realize that we can't do it. And that's what he's trying to tell us, is that we have no power to do anything. We're completely weak without him. And so when he puts us in situations where we feel like, we're not living up to the challenge, that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted us to see that and to call out to him.
Yes, thank you. That's a great point, and it's a great point to end. So, Narantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Thank you.
I'm more comfortable without Bible. Thank you.
Sometimes you want to tune in for a person.